I'm going to tell you why I think running back is the best position on the team next year. I'm going to see if Curtis agrees or disagrees with me.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Ryan Harings. I'm your host, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we are talking positions on the team we feel best and worst about, the one we're most intrigued to see, big picture state of the program. And we always do this. I've been starting to do this actually. Today's episode unofficially brought to you by former Badger players. We got the late and great Lou Holland up there, 1962 first team All Big Ten halfback, Big Ten's leading scorer in 62-63, 62 Big Ten champion, 63 Rose Bowl. And we are bringing on his grandson today, the great Curtis Holland, playmaker himself. Really quick, I want to get into big picture positions. We got a bunch we want to talk about, but Lou Holland, just what else do you know about him, remembering that maybe Badger fans don't know?
I think the funny thing is, like, a lot of his football accomplishments, like, I knew of growing up, but like I never really in front of my mind. Obviously, I was born in '92, so it wasn't like I was ever able to experience any of them. For me, aside from obviously being my grandpa, the thing that he was well known for is he was one of the first African Americans in Chicago to really enter the financial circuit and have a lot of success. And so I remember meeting some former players and former athletes at the school who would tell me about that. He was an inspiration to them getting into business. He helped open a lot of doors for them to get into different companies, get into real estate, get into finance, get into all those kinds of things. He had a weekly show that he discussed kind of trading in Wall Street. He was also an angel investor in Chipotle. So the things around that angle is kind of more of what I remember about my grandpa.
Well, he also invested in health programs, health services, correct? I'm trying to remember what.
So Alzheimer's has run in my family for a long time, and now my dad, obviously, is a lot more involved in that, and has been involved in that since my grandpa passed away. And so a lot of philanthropy and fundraising has been done to help the Alzheimer's Research Center at the University of Wisconsin, and it's one of the world leading research centers for Alzheimer's. So they're doing a lot of great work there. And we can definitely provide some information for anybody who's interested in helping out.
That's awesome stuff. And one of the cool things about talking about former players is highlighting some of those stories. Let's get into this year's football team, next year's football team coming up. I wanted to start with, we put this on the Discord too. What position do you feel best about on next year's team? I'm going to kick it to you first and then give you mine.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's pretty straightforward. It's a Wisconsin classic. I'm going to say the offensive line. I know we lose two starters. Our left tackle, who's been there for 3 years, and Huber, who I thought was the unsung hero of the offensive line last year, really solid guard for us. But I feel really, really good in the replacements. I feel like Kevin Heywood is going to be that guy. I think he's going to come in, he's going to take over and immediately put the Big Ten on notice. I think he could easily be one of, if not our best left tackle in recent memory. And then whoever we get to play guard, I feel pretty confident. I think a Benchwall could fill that role. I think if Mandel steps up, takes over, I think, he could do successful there. If any freshman happens to win that spot, then obviously they're going to be someone who I think has a lot of potential upside. So, I feel really confident there. I think Blazek is one of our unsung coaching heroes on this staff. Like, I think we need to make sure we do whatever we can to keep him. Ohio State just had their offensive line coach go away. So, just keep him away from the phone for a couple weeks,
Lock him away.
Yeah. Maybe lock his agent in the basement or time to the goalpost or something. But I feel really confident with that. And then on top of that, I feel really confident in shifting the Grimes being a former offensive line coach himself, someone who builds the offense from the offensive line out. I think he's going to put them in position to be a lot more successful than maybe what we saw from Longo last year.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Heywood, I think, is going to be really good. Malman, I think, has always been underrated. I agree with you. I think Huber was the underrated guy on that line last year. Versatile, tough, played a ton of snaps.
Not a lot of issues. Good PFF grades every week. Didn't give up a lot of sacks. Just an all around solid player for us.
And he could slide all over the line too. He gave you that swing ability. I'm going to go running backs. I think this is more projection, right? Obviously last year, and some of it has to do with Grimes as well. Same to your point on offense line. I think the running backs are going to thrive under Grimes. You got 2 4-star guys, both big time talents. Talking to people in the program, hearing people talk about Darion, Dupree, Dilon Jones. I think I think both are in for a big year. I think both are exceptionally talented. And then your third guy's Yak. And we all know that I think for a third running back, you could do way, way worse than Cade Yacamelli. So I'm going to go running back there. The offensive line, my question is still, you have to replace two starters. And then I didn't think Renfro had a great year last year from both the PFF standpoint and just kind of the eye test. It felt like I thought he'd be a little more powerful at the point of attack. I know we were knocking off Ross. The snaps were great, which is important. He's a leader. He's tough. I think he needs to get a little bit better, which I think he can this year in another healthy year after last year's kind of bounce back season.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was a few times where, you're watching Renfro and there's a guy getting pushed back into the quarterback's grill. It was him sometimes. But I don't think, an extra year of training hurts. I don't think an extra year of experience hurts, a guy who maybe is a little bit on the smaller side, learning some techniques, figuring out how to play, and then having the experience of playing, really good defensive lines last year. I don't think that hurts per se. And I think, again, I think we're going to have heavier sets. I think we're going to do a little bit more running plays that advantage the offensive line as opposed to kind of put them in unique situations. And he's still an athlete. I mean, we still had one of the highest pass blocking grades in the country, even with the struggles that we had last year. So I do feel like, while I understand kind of where you're coming from, I do feel like we'll probably see some improvement. And then again, it never hurts to have a veteran there.
And you're right. Like statistically, this was a pretty good line last year, and that should be said and not left unsaid. And I think Kevin Heywood's a star. I've said it. I think he's in Madison for 3 years. It's a year last year, this year, next year, off to the NFL. Good sir, enjoy your travels. Let's shift it to spot that you're most worried about. I'll go first on this one. To me, it's corner. It's still corner. It's corner. I think even if Nizer Fortgreen comes back, who we talked about on the show, just because there's no depth there, man. And you don't usually make it. The Badgers haven't. No team does. You don't make it through an entire season without losing somebody in the secondary, somebody at corner. You have Rico Beck. Even if you have Nizer, there's nobody experienced behind him. You're going to count on a freshman in Hallman or in Harper or Agar to step up. You're going to count on transfer portal guys, which they didn't. They honestly, I think they did great in the front seven in the portal. I love the tight end. I like Hamper. They missed on a lot of their top portal cornerback targets. That's not a spot that they really, really reloaded at a high level in the portal. I think there's a lack of depth. And if you lose Nizer, if he doesn't come back, and I would say that's 50-50, man, that spot is tough with some of the offenses you're going to face this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I would take corner. I'm going to say something different just because, I want to give some other perspectives. But, yeah, I think that's still a spot that the staff probably feels, a little bit I would say probably keeps them up a little bit at night. Definitely, especially what happened with Xavier Lucas. I think losing just that skill and that talent, it's almost impossible to replace, right? So, again, you are going to be relying on some younger guys. I think one of the things that maybe gives us a little bit of help in that space is that the way we're going to play football kind of moving forward with Grimes could be a little bit more ball control based offense. So it'll be a little bit easier to not have to necessarily rely on them as much or as heavily as maybe we did last year. And so, that does give me some encouragement. Hopefully we can get Nizer back. I think he has until the 7th, which is in 4 days, to find some answers. So we should know, this week what's going to happen there. I know from what I've heard, the staff does feel pretty good. If they had more than 4 days to get this sorted, they feel good about their case. But because of the urgent nature of it, it kind of puts it up in the air. So, we'll see kind of how that plays out. For me, I would say the one I have the most concern with, I just got to hit the nail on the head, is the defensive line. We're bringing in, 7 new defensive linemen, a lot of guys who are really talented, especially the younger guys. I think you have some guys that are younger that are going to be 1 year more mature. So I think that helps. Obviously, you have Dilon Jones got play time last year. Brandon Lane is now going to have to probably get some play time or factor in the rotation a little bit. I'm curious to see how Jamal Howard develops, now that he's kind of staying back here. Keeping that size never really hurts. But yeah, defensive line, we have to see improvement there. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm just asking for somewhat ability to stop the run. Teams averaging less than 4 yards of carry on us. We can do that. That's going to help us a lot on the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and listen, Herb Herman in the Discord D-line is most concerning because I can't get the Iowa game out of my head. You were there, Curtis. Not sure if we have done enough to get back to solid at that position. This one is, let me ask you this one, Smart Fool. Safety is the most concerning spot without Wohler. The best is the offensive line from the Smart Fool. How do you feel about safety right now?
I mean, safety and corner, to me, I kind of put in the same boat. I mean, there's just a lack of depth there. Getting Zachman back was a coup, in my opinion. I think having him, he played significantly better last year. I thought he was tremendously improved. So getting him back was huge. I think Austin Brown, obviously you can kind of cycle him around. I think he's pretty good as a rangy safety. So I do feel comfortable with him back there. But then again, you're relying on some guys that maybe don't have a lot of experience, so you're hoping that the depth that we have built through recruiting can step up a little bit. The good news is, again, I think there's going to be less defensive snaps overall. So hopefully you can rely, if you have to, on Zachman and Brown more, so that we're not having to necessarily go a couple series without one of them in the game. And so that's kind of where, I'm hoping that you see a little bit more just defensive success overall. But again, I understand where they're coming from there. I'd probably put that in the same boat as corner.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I do think the one differentiator for me at safety is I think they hit on higher priority safety portal guys with Trainer and Young coming in than they did at the cornerback spot. So I feel a little bit better about those two guys coming in than what they've landed through the portal.
I'll say this: Matt Young to me seems like just like a Jim Leonard kind of guy, like some guy that's like, no one believed in me, everybody doubted me. Now I'm here to just prove everyone wrong, and I love that that's the attitude. And then Trainer coming in with the attitude of, I'm just here to hit people. I mean, it's just Latu 2.0, but maybe he will avoid penalties. So that could be a good thing. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I'm excited for him. I think Matt Young's going to have a bright future.
I think so, man. I think he's an in-the-box guy, but you need that. You need that versatility in the defense, and I think that's what a lot of what Wohler was. Not all the time last year, but if he can replace some of that, and I really like Zachman. I think Brown is another guy, and you mentioned him as well, that could be in line for a big step up this year. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back, talk about a position that you are most intrigued by last year. What are you most excited to see next season on this Badgers football team? Coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. Game Time is awesome. You need to get tickets to anything, right? Obviously, football is going to be coming up sooner than we think. This stuff always happens, but also basketball's in season right now. Whatever you need, maybe you can get a last-minute deal on a Super Bowl ticket. I don't know. But concerts, comedy, theater, it's all over on Game Time. Best seat inventory, last-minute flash deals, so you don't even always have to plan months in advance. If you just have a whim and hey, I got a Friday off, let me go do something. I've done that, and I've got tickets on the way to the stadium through Game Time. Download the app today. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create the account, download the app, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. That's over at our great friends at Game Time. Let's go back into this. Let's talk about position we are most excited to see this year. Curtis, my man, what are you most excited / intrigued by this year, position-wise?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm actually going to say the offensive skill position. So running back, obviously, I think Darion Dupree and I think Dilon Jones are tremendous athletes. I think we saw a little bit of flash of what they could be moving forward. And quite frankly, I don't think they were really set up for success last year. I don't think anybody in the running game, honestly, was very much set up for success last year in what we were doing on offense. So I think having a more run-focused offense with those guys who, we'll be honest. I mean, Darion Dupree, we were in a recruiting battle with Alabama. Dilon Jones, we were in a recruiting battle with Penn State and stuff like that. Those are both high 4-star level guys, and they're both really good athletes. So I feel really good about them. I'm excited to see what they can bring. Obviously, I need to see some production because we haven't seen really any production from them yet. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that turns out. And then, the receiving core, I mean, I think you got Vinny Anthony as your one. But I'm curious to see kind of how it plays out outside of that. I mean, Tretch, I think you see flashes there, here and there. Hopefully, you see him take a next step and get better. And then, the guy we brought in, Hamper and Ballard. Ballard's really, really fast. Has some things to work on, looking at his film a little bit from Ohio State. And then, I'm really excited about Hamper. I think he could be a good possession receiver. He had 900 yards at Idaho. That's, it's FCS, but it's still 900 yards. He balled out against Oregon. He balled out against some of the better teams they played. So excited to see kind of what he can bring to the table and hopefully give us a nice third option.
I love that answer. And that's something you've harped on before on the show is you really look for production from the receiver spot. Now, obviously, we have two extreme cases of this with Ballard and Hamper, right? But Hamper, to your point, very productive, high yards per catch, big catch radius. I went receiver. Certainly, you cheated going all skill positions, but I love it. The receiver thing's fascinating to me because you have another year with Vinny Anthony coming back as the man. Like, he is now the guy. What is he going to look like with another year of refining that craft? You have Tretch coming in. He's going to step into a high usage role. He has to. He's coming in to be Pauling. Like, he's not to be Pauling, but to be that guy. And then you have Eugene Hilton Jr. coming in, who I've already heard expect him to maybe play a little bit this year. I want to see what Hamper looks like. Ballard is as athletically talented as a guy Wisconsin's had since, I don't know, fill in the blank.
He would be the highest recruit we've ever got since CJ Williams. So, right up there.
That one didn't work great, but But like the upside, you're intrigued, right? Like that's what it. Fans at our core, we're always intrigued by upside. We're more intrigued by upside than anything else. Like when your baseball team drafts a guy who throws 99, and it's wild thing, right? It's from Major League Baseball. He's throwing it everywhere, but he throws 99. You always are thinking about, well, what if it clicks? Well, what if it clicks with Ballard? What if Eugene's ready? What if Tretch takes a step up? Like I think that receiver room is fascinating to me. That is the one I think I'm most intrigued by. Let me ask you this. I want to flip it a little bit. You're highest on the offensive line. You're kind of lowest on maybe the defensive line. What is the potential downside you see with the offensive line, and what is the kind of light at the end of the tunnel with that front seven for you?
Well, I'll start with the front seven. I think the thing to me I like is that we added a lot of size. I think it was very clear to the staff, based on conversations I've had with people I know, that they knew going into last season that they were light on the defensive front. And what's more, I think it was pretty clear, looking back in retrospect, that even some of the guys they had, they weren't very confident in being able to perform to get on the field. And we talked about, getting 3-down linemen, all these things, and we never really saw that, which I think is a lot of the issue that we had specifically in the run game. I think the staff probably felt that they were limited in what they were going to be able to do. And you see that with a lot of the movement we had this offseason when it comes to guys who are transferring in and out. The thing that I like that we brought in is we brought in a lot of size. We brought in a lot of height. We brought in a lot of length. We brought in a lot of weight. And we brought in, again, some proven production. It's at lower levels. So that's why I'm still kind of like, I don't know, I got to see it. But just the act of having more physical mass. Like, I think people overcomplicate football all the time. It's not that complicated. If you have to move 300-pound linemen, or one lineman who's barely 300 pounds, one who's 297, and then two 230-pound outside linebackers, which one is harder to physically do, right? And that's where I think we added some weight, we added some strength, we added something that just makes it harder. Even if they just sit there, it's still harder to move them, right? So that's why I feel like I'm excited about what we've brought in from just a physical perspective. And then
to tally on that, we just added some plates onto the blocking sled. Essentially, like it's harder to move that thing, and they brought in more numbers, and I think they were more targeted this year. Give me your highest on the offensive line. You really like all the pieces there, but give me the thing that worries you there.
I mean, youth. I mean, it's just, you're starting 2 new starters. They never played together before. Obviously, health too matters a lot. I mean, you have right now we're banking on the fact we got 3 returning starters, but Renfro could go down. What happens then, right? Those are the things that obviously you always look at with offensive line. We have been stupidly fortunate on our offensive line for the last 2 years. I mean, I know a lot of people sometimes look at, question some of the things we're doing in strength and conditioning, but like we haven't had 2 straight years now with no significant offensive line injury. I mean, knock on wood, good God, that's crazy. Like that's insane to think about. So, obviously that's something that you think about and you worry about, especially in probably a more run heavy offense. It sounds like they're going to create advantageous blocking matchups for us, but you still worry about that. So that's where I would say my concerns are.
A couple comments here I want to get to before we shift topics here. TJ24 says best is the inside linebackers, and also from Ron Weasley, best is the middle linebackers. Thoughts on being really high in the middle linebackers? A spot neither of us hit on with this.
So I'm a huge fan of Alliegro. I think Alliegro is like a bigger, more athletic Leo Chenal. He's got that same kind of mean streak in him.
I don't know if there's anybody bigger and more athletic than Chenal, though.
I mean, he was like 6'2", 245. I think Allegro's 6'4", 245.
I think he's like 247 actually. So maybe he is bigger. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like he's a I know my heights and weights, man. So I think he's more athletic in the sense that he's fast. He's much faster. Much more. Like Leo, what was his scout? He couldn't cover, right? Alliegro can cover, right? So that's kind of where I feel like he's that. I remember 2020, Leo Chenal was kind of semi-injured, I think, starting the year. Didn't play a lot, but when he played, he flashed. I kind of feel the same way about Alliegro. Not that he was injured, but when he played, he flashed, right? And so I think with him being the guy going into next year, I think you see a lot from him. Taka Curtis, I think, finally being healthy. That seems to be what I've been hearing everywhere, is that he just wasn't healthy. Now he's finally healthy. That'll be intriguing to see. He definitely was hampered by his ability to move laterally last year. That hurt him a lot, and it was easy to see on the film. So I'm curious to see kind of how that all plays out. I like Tyler Janzi a lot. So we'll see. I feel like there's less depth there than last year. Because like it or not, I do think Jaheim Thomas and Jake Chaney actually played well in what they were asked to do. So, I do think that losing some of that depth hurts us a little bit, which is why I wouldn't say it was my number 1 spot, but I do like what we have coming back.
Just to go on a little bit more on your Alliegro to Chanel point, Alliegro is awesome, but he comes from a place when he played high school, he was more of a deep safety coverage linebacker. He played in the second. I think he's more versatile. Like he can do a lot more on the field. Whereas Leo, nobody was blowing up the A gap like Leo. Like that's a unique trait that he was like a Sherman tank. But yeah, Alliegro, he might be the closest thing to an impact guy on the defense right now, right? I'm trying to think who else would you peg as like that's the impact guy on the defense. I think it's Alliegro. I think it's pretty easy.
Maybe we get lucky again with another defensive lineman who can step in, like a JVR Suggs. Maybe he has another Elijah Hills type season. Maybe you see Dilon Johnson take a step. Maybe some of these other guys, Big Perk. I mean, first of all, we're bound to get at least another 10 tackles for losses with a guy named Big Perk. You can't not have at least a 10 more tackles for loss with Big Perk on the defensive line. Let's be real about that. So, I do think, maybe you could see something like that come up. I mean, Rico could return to form from the year before. So there's definitely some potential guys out there. But yeah, I do think Alliegro is going to be an impact player for us for sure.
We're going to take one more quick break, come back with Curtis. We're going to talk a little bit about Wisconsin, NIL. Big picture, just thoughts on where Wisconsin is in that front. That's coming up next. Locked on Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second, as always, saying thank you to tuning in. Thank you for being here every single day. All right, let's come back into this. We got Curtis. Always grateful to have Curtis on the show. He's in the Discord. He's on Twitter. Grandson, obviously, of Lou Holland, a Wisconsin Hall of Fame member. Let's start here, man. Big picture, we want to hit on a couple big picture thoughts, both things that we've kind of just heard or wanted to talk about. I want to start here with the NIL discussion. Where do you think Wisconsin is just right now from an overall holistic standpoint?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of just insight based on, people that I know and talk to related to the program. And I know that from a collective bargaining perspective moving forward, there's 100% alignment with what needs to be done. I think, from, the Chancellor Mnuchin down to McIntosh down to Fickell, they all realize, what is needed from a collective bargaining perspective in order to build their roster and then maintain their roster moving forward. And I think they're all on the same page. And right now that page is within, reason, within Title IX. We want to give as much as we can to the football program to allow this team to be successful, which is encouraging. I think when we get the collective bargaining money moving forward, we're going to be able to take full advantage of that right out the gate. Wisconsin is in a unique position as an athletic department, is that we're in the black. A lot of schools aren't, right? Ohio State, they just won a title. They're not in the black, right? So it's, and obviously schools can manipulate those money. Ohio State's not going to be hurting for money next year, but some smaller schools, they might be. Right. And so that's something to consider. That's an advantageous position that we're in. That's not really the case for everybody. So, knowing that, I think it's going to allow us to continue to build NIL off the back of that. And I think the staff knows. I think it's pretty clear that, like, hey, we got to step up our investment from a financial perspective if we really want to be competitive. And so I think that message is getting out. I think people know that. And I think, hopefully we see that continue to grow. Obviously, there needs to be some success married to that. And there's still going to be people who feel that, I don't know if I'd ever want to give NIL money to an athlete who can go and pull Xavier Lucas and just dip out. Right. So, there's always going to be that piece to it. But I do think that no one at the university has any illusions of what it's going to take to be successful in the Big Ten moving forward.
Big picture, and I don't know if I'm just kind of shotgunning this. I don't know if you have insight here or if there's things you can or can't talk about on it. But is there any idea of how Title IX is going to work itself out in Wisconsin in Big Nine in regards to NIL money? Where
I think a lot of people are still figuring that out. I mean, I from who I've talked to and know, like they still are trying to figure it out. Like it's lawyers are working on it. Different things are happening in that space. The state of Wisconsin, has its own set of laws. Like I think people also don't quite understand that each state has its own state laws that regard to Title IX and things like that. So each state, even within the conference, is going to be different. Illinois will handle it different than Wisconsin. Will handle it different than Ohio. Will handle it different than Michigan. Like they're all different to some degree. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces with it, and people are still working through it. The thing that I feel confident in is that they are 100% invested in football success. I think the athletic department knows that without football, we're not bringing in the revenue we need to be successful.
One of the things we talked a lot is coaches, right? We talked about coaches moving, coach alignment, more cohesion. Some of this feels like buzzwords, like things that are easy to say, but I do really feel like this staff is in a better spot. And I also feel like, though, they're kind of in a bit of a make or break year, not to win 9 games, not to get to the playoffs, not any of that stuff, but a make or break year to show progress. Otherwise, you're going to start losing momentum here. Thoughts on kind of those two things? Is this kind of a make or break year just to show progress? And then does this staff legitimately feel more cohesive, or is that just a buzzword that's getting thrown around?
I mean, it's tough to tell, all the way, and we won't really know until 6-7 months, right? We won't really be able to see sort of what that all looks like. From what I know, I do feel like they definitely feel like they've made a lot better moves and put a lot better people in position to be successful. I think about the moves that we've made. I think Grimes, kind of just understanding his scheme a little bit, learning about him over the last few months, it definitely feels like he is the right type of offensive coordinator for what Wisconsin is good at and what we can recruit to and what we have traditionally done well at. I think he's been a lot more collaborative with the offensive staff, involved them in a lot more meetings, involved them in a lot more thoughts. And I think that's kind of built a cohesion that maybe didn't exist for the past 2 years. I think for those who know, it was clear that mistakes were made when they first got here in terms of evaluating what they wanted to do on their team and how they wanted Wisconsin to look. I think it's been a learning experience for Luke Fickell. I think, in him coming in kind of in the dawn of really heavy transportal, heavy NIL, still learning it on his own, coming in, learning a new roster, learning recruiting, the recruiting for Wisconsin, learning transfers, learning Madison. I mean, dude was living in a hotel for a month, right? So all those things kind of coming in, he made some mistakes. The good news is, at least from what I know, there's no illusion that they didn't make mistakes. They know where they messed up. They know where they made mistakes, and they're working to fix them. And I think that's the encouraging thing, because at the end of the day, everybody's going to make mistakes. No one's perfect. If we were to fire Luke Fickell tomorrow, hire a new coach, he's going to have the same problems that Luke Fickell had, right? The good news is at least Fickell is learning from these mistakes, and I think they're making better decisions moving forward.
And then what about make or break year? And not in terms of like Luke Fickell is going to get fired, but if you want, I feel like you're in a spot where if you want to keep momentum going, you want to keep donors happy, you want to keep fans engaged, recruiting classes engaged, keep players on the roster, right? Like, I think this is an important year to show progress on that front. And that could mean that could just mean winning 6 games, but in a way where you're not getting blown out by Iowa, where you win one of those tough games on the schedule, something you can point to, right? Something you can plant your flag and say, this vision works. You see this is results.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough this year. I think in terms of make or break, I genuinely think the make or break is probably next season. I would say that the heaviness of the schedule sort of lightens up a little bit, although Notre Dame did just play for a national title, so it's not like that's going to be a walk in the park or anything like that. I mean, Penn State was in the Final Four. So, I mean, after this year, looking at next year, it's like, wow, that's a way harder schedule than it looked a year ago. But, no, I think next year is going to be the big year, because that's where you see Fickell and Tressel and them's classes start to materialize into juniors and seniors, where they're really going to be the impact players, the meat, the bulk of the team. I think that's why that makes it more of an impact year. Obviously, this year, is going to be an important year in terms of the momentum of this program. We still have some recruiting momentum. Players are still bought into what Fickell's selling. The team is still, at least from what I heard, working, hand in hand, moving forward, and in a better, I think, headspace than the last 2 years, at least from what I understand. But in order for that to continue, I mean, you do need to see some improvements. And so what does that look like? It's tough for me to say. I mean, if we go 6-6 again next year, but we're in every single game, we lose the games, we lose by 1 touchdown, we don't get blown out by an Iowa or Nebraska. Right. Is that improvement? I mean, we're 6-6, so it's just kind of tough to say what that looks like altogether. And losing's hard. I mean, you lose games, players are going to take it some ways, and sometimes that hits harder than maybe you think. I think last year it was clear after we lost to Iowa and lost to Oregon, a lot of the spirit of the team had sort of faded away, kind of going into the end of the year. So, can we survive something like that again, right? And if we do play better against the Minnesotas, the Illinois to close the year out, is that enough to satisfy the fan base? I think the big thing that is different with football now is that when we were dominating the Big Ten West, 10 years ago, a lot of the programs were not taking football as serious as Wisconsin was. And the staffs that they had were nowhere near as good as the staffs they have now. Now it's 2025. COVID, I think, changed everything. All these schools realized that without football, they were making no money. And so they realized, okay, we actually have to get serious and invest in this. And the reality is the Big Ten's got a lot of money. Illinois has got a lot of money. Indiana has a lot of money. Like, these schools are no slouches. And so they decided, you know what? It's time for us to stop joking around with football. We got to get serious. And that upped everybody's game. Wisconsin's no different. We got to up our game too. But I think we were kind of used to being the only school that cared, and everybody else just kind of, lazily half-assed it. And now you're seeing all of these schools fight to win. And so that changes everything. It makes it more like the NFL. There's going to be a lot more parity now. And so I think people just need to understand that, like, this isn't the Purdue that we played. Well, I guess Purdue's a bad example. This isn't the Indiana. This isn't the Indiana that we played 10 years ago and beat them by 40. This is an Indiana that says, we have $13 million in NIL. We want to win a championship. It's a different team. It's a fundamentally different program. I don't care that they were getting walked on forever, right? Northwestern. We're Northwestern. We have, billions and billions in endowment. Let's build an $800 million stadium because we're Northwestern. We're a founding member of this conference. We want to be good, right? So I think people just have to recognize that, like, yeah, I think Wisconsin can still reclaim its rightful throne atop the, at least the former Big Ten West All rivals, but it's not going to be anywhere near as a simple of a process as it's been for most of our time.
No, that's a really good point, because people talk about the Big Ten in terms of depth of quality, and then we got to kind of wrap up here. But, they talk about it in terms of Oregon coming in and USC coming in and Ohio State going mega warp drive and Michigan and Penn State. But what you don't recognize is Illinois has raised the floor. Indiana's raised the floor. Iowa's still Iowa. Minnesota's been better. And that floor has come up. That ceiling has gotten higher. And whereas Wisconsin used to be top tier in the mid ground of that Big Ten, now the mid ground includes all those other teams because they've come up. They've moved up, man. They're not in the streets anymore. They're up in the apartment with us. And we're still looking up at the condos at the top. So it's a really good point. We do got to wrap it up here. As always, Curtis is awesome. Really grateful for your time, man. When you're done, you go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest stories from the conference, realignment, NIL, portal stuff. That's all happening over on that channel. On Wisconsin as always, and we will talk to you later.